All right, it is Law Dog Corvette, and we're back working on the 74 Corvette convertible. And today, well, maybe first things first. I'm in a new garage. I'm going to do a whole episode on our new garage, but we are in a very different place. We as a family moved from Stafford County, Virginia to Fredericksburg, Virginia. It's just about 20 miles away, but we were able to get a farm and a giant standalone garage. So we've got the Corvette in the new garage. We are not even close to organized, but it's still no time to rest because the Corvette needs some work. All right, as we were putting the Corvette together, we basically did the steering all stock, but I got all new pieces. So the entire steering, all the joints are all new, and we got a new ram, we got a new power steering pump, we got a new drag link. So all those pieces were all brand new. The only thing we didn't get brand new is a new steering box. We used the old steering box, we took it apart, packed it full of new grease, and put it back together. That probably was a mistake because it just doesn't handle like I want it to handle. It is kind of has a mind of its own, kind of floats a little bit. There is play in the steering, and the only component that's not new is the actual steering mechanism. And so that's what we decided to do, is get rid of that, and we purchased a Borgeson unit. Borgeson makes a unit that it gets rid of the ram arm, and the power steering pump pumps directly into the unit itself. So today's episode, we're going to install the Borgeson power steering system. And so come on in and let me show you what we're going to be replacing, and then we'll go from there. So if you look here, obviously this is the engine bay, and this right here, this piece, that is the steering component. There is the rag joint right up there, and here is the component. There's some adjustments on these adjustment screws right here. I've played with them, and you know, it will adjust the steering, but it still doesn't have the responsiveness that I want. So that piece is coming out. The ram, assist ram, is also going to be deleted, and we're going to go to the Borgeson power steering. All right, so here's the Borgeson unit. We just opened the box, and this is the pieces you'll get. So you'll get, this is your main piece. This will replace the steering knuckle. And you can see that instead of the power steering high side and low side going into the ram, the power steering pump actually pumps into the unit itself. It's quite a bit bigger than the stock knuckle, so there will have to be some adjustments to the steering column, but that steering column should handle it. Comes with two new hoses because our hoses are going to be a different length. One hose is already pre-cut, and the other one you have to cut the length. A new drag link, and a brand new rag joint. All right, first step is removal. And of course you have cars with manual steering, cars with power steering. And so we have power steering, and then it says something very scary. Steering column removal. I hope I do not have to do that, but I'm going with cars with power steering. Disconnect column coupler at the steering box. Remove pitman arm from the steering box and relay rod. Remove bolts holding original steering box. Remove it from the car. Remove factory ram assembly. control valve and hoses, you may use your pump once it is flush. So let's go under the car. So we got the car jacked up, and of course this wheel is off. It obviously is going to be a lot easier to get a hold of. And this bolt has to come off, and it's going to be a bear. The bolt itself will come off pretty easily, but it is to get that off of the steering box is going to be very difficult, but there's a special tool, although I'm already seeing, I've got side pipe headers on this car, and the clearance is really tight. So that's going to be one issue. Here's the ram right here. This whole assembly is going to come out. This is the control valve right here. That assembly is going to come out. And those hoses up here, those will be disconnected from the control valve. So we will not be using this control valve, and will not be using this ram at all. And of course, you can see one of the major problems, even with a brand new steering system, the ram, control valve, all the hoses are pretty much brand new. I've got 600 miles on this car, and it is, you know, completely wet under here. They leak when new. So hopefully the Borgeson box will solve that. All right, the next step is control valve. We got that out. You're gonna need a little bit of a pickle fork right here to pop the other end of the pitman arm off the control valve. Just a couple, very light taps, it'll pop right off. And so once that's off, then that just unscrews from your control arms. So that's pretty easy. And the reason I'm doing all of this is because I cannot get that tool on the pitman arm up under here because my headers are in the way. So I'm taking everything else off, trying to not unbolt the headers. But we will see if we have to unbolt the headers. So next is the rag joint. And of course that's up here. And there's the rag joint, and you can already see we've taken off this nut, and I just need to turn the wheel to access the other nuts, and then we will be able to separate the rag joint, pushing that steering column that way and releasing the steering box from the steering column. So we're going to do that now. All right, next piece to take out is the rag joint. These are 1/2 inch right there, and this one is a special bolt. You got to have the 12-point socket, but not that bad. Again, for me, I just put this rag joint on about, well, exactly 600 miles ago, so back in the summer. So none of these bolts were super tight. Everything was, tight enough, but not frozen. So for me, very easy to get off. If you're taking a rag joint off that's been on there 35 years, you're gonna have a lot more trouble. The Bogeson unit comes with its own brand new rag joint, and it has locks right here and here. So anyways, that's gonna give me more access to the top of the steering box. All right, the next thing we're gonna have to do is get the pitman arm off the steering box. You're gonna need that, which is a 1 5/16 socket. I had to go buy this special at Harbor Freight. And then of course, it's so big, you need a 3/4 inch, driver. Bolt is right there. And once that bolt's off, then we're gonna take our pitman arm puller and start pulling the pitman arm off of the steering box. All right. All right, here we go. Headers make getting the steering box out very hard. So I got the steering box, the bolts holding the steering box out, 1, 2, and there's one right there, 3, out. That dropped the steering box enough so I can get this pitman arm puller on the pitman arm. I tried taking the box out with the pitman arm on, impossible, so here we are. That is not an easy task. When I put my steering box back on, I never separated the pitman arm from the steering box. So, and I don't think it ever was. So that pitman arm was on the steering box knuckle for nearly 45 years. So yeah, that was a big deal. All right, but it's off. And here comes the steering box out the top. Thanks. All right, after much work, the steering knuckle is out of the Corvette. You can see down here, there are 3 bolts that hold it in. These are carriage bolts, so the bolt on one side you can't get a hold of, but they also have this little carriage style that fits in the frame to keep it from spinning. These are fine thread, so you just have to spin this nut quite a bit to get it off. But the only way to get the pitman arm puller, this tool, onto the pitman arm, which fits like basically right there, is to, if you have headers on, is to take the bolts out. That will let the steering knuckle drop about 2 inches, and then you can get this pitman arm puller on the pitman arm that sits right there, and it pulls off. And then once that's off, the steering knuckle just literally just pulls right out of the top of the engine bay. It's pretty easy. So first step of getting of installing the Borgeson power steering conversion is take all of the power steering components off of the Corvette. That step is done, so I'm now in the installation process at this point. So here we go with the first step of installation. All right, I'm happy to report that you can, without removing the headers, get the Bogeson unit in and attached to the steering column. The column did have to go in towards the passenger compartment about 2 inches. When you're pushing that column in, you got to kind of tap it with a hammer. I used a rubber mallet. Go slow and continue to do fitment. You don't want to have to try to pull it out. I hit mine exactly in, but the header stayed on and I was able to get the unit in. So now we're going to hook up the pitman arm, and then here are the high pressure and low pressure side that are comes from the power steering unit. Hook up those hoses and we're ready to roll. All right, we got the installation of the pitman arm, the old pitman arm on the new Borgeson box. You will have to reuse your old pitman arm. I have cleaned this one up a little bit, and you don't have to really worry about how to put this on. The pitman arm and the Borgeson unit have little indentions in the spines. There's only really one way it goes on. So just don't force it. Just keep moving the pitman arm until it just basically starts to slide on. And then once you have it on a little bit, then you're gonna have to take that nut That nut and lock washer come with the Borgeson unit, and then of course you need your giant wrench again. So go slow and tighten the pitman arm on the Borgeson. All right, if you have a manual steering car, you won't have this, but if you had a power steering car, then you've got to install this piece called the drag link. And this is where you're going to try to do some alignment. It doesn't have to be perfect first time, just you want to try to make your steering wheel straight, lock that into place on your steering column lock, and then move this piece in or out, which will turn the wheels left or right, and you're looking for that, you know, straight as possible. But this is where you're going to try to just get it as best you can. All right, the hoses attach to the top of the Borgeson unit instead of going to the drag link. So routing the hoses around to make sure they don't come anywhere near the headers. That was, you know, difficult, maybe is not the word, but it was challenging because you're going to want to, there's a couple ways you can go. We decided to go all the way to the front of the engine and then down. All right, so we got the Borgeson unit in. She's feeling very nice. We had to bleed out all of the air in the system. That's just keeping the Corvette on jacks and going left stop, right stop, left stop, right stop with the engine off, and then doing the same thing with the engine on. Check for leaks, and then you're good to go. I have not had it aligned. I'm going to need alignment. But so far, all of the play that was in the old box is gone. It doesn't leak at all, and there's definitely a more solid connection between the steering wheel and the road. It's just a little bit more responsive. The front end doesn't float on me. So all in all, a very good purchase, a very good upgrade. If you're doing a C3 restoration, I would say don't put the old steering box on. Go ahead and do the Borgeson upgrade. It absolutely will fit with headers, so don't be afraid if you have headers. We're running Doug's Sidepipe headers. It fits just fine. All right, so that's the update. We'll have to schedule it to get it on alignment. Other than that, highly recommend this upgrade. It's definitely going to make your driving experience of your C3 much better. All right, that's it for today's episode, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.